Hello everybody, and welcome to a new series that I'm doing for Sword Art Online Fatal Bullet, which is all about boss guides and how to defeat them, what's important, what you should pay attention to. It's going to be a pretty in-depth guide. Don't take my word as God. I'm not going to be completely right 100% on everything, but I'm not going to speak with 100% confidence on anything that I'm not 100% confident about. Anyway, I will make it very subjective. So without further ado, let's go ahead with the Angry Berserker boss. The first boss of the game, either level 12 or 82 if you're on normal or expert mode of the, I think it's a Berserker enemy type. It's at the end of the control facility after unlocking both locks from their corresponding buttons, otherwise known to me as the PCP Armadillo class enemy, and I'll explain that one in a little while. This boss is relatively basic and simple, and it's your classic brute kind of RPG boss. High HP, tanky, slow, and easy to anticipate, but pretty strong. Okay, so number 1, attacks. So the Angry Berserker has a very baseline attack set or moveset, most of which are fairly easy to see coming and get out of the way of. He has some specific attacks that could easily be a problem for you, especially on expert difficulty. I had a few issues the second time around myself with this guy. The most common attack that he'll do is lunge straight at you with a downward slice. Now you can easily retreat from him and then roll to the left or right at the last minute. Sometimes he'll launch a combo of attacks instead of just one single hit. Typically, you can just spam your roll and get out of the way of these. And occasionally, he'll enter an enraged status, screaming into the heavens like a pissed-off banshee, and beating your ass like a 10-cent hooker. This status is always followed by a flurry of circular axe strikes from hell that will be directed at one unfortunate victim when he glows red, so get the fuck out. When enraged, the Angry Berserker will move faster, attack faster, and I assume he deals more damage. It's hard to tell if that's true even in post, as I swapped out with a couple of different characters with different vitality scores, so I really can't tell by the numbers here. Moving on to the next segment, defense. How can you even hope to be safe from this galumping behemoth in front of you? Well, like I said, this should be a fairly easy thing to deal with on the first try, or even the second if you're prepared. Understand that level does make a major impact in this game, so if he's really kicking your ass, then grind a little bit or get some better equipment. This boss is one of the few that you can even take out without a healer if you dish out enough damage, as reviving allies leaves you very vulnerable for his powerful hits. You should be able to side roll or roll away from just about every attack he has, with the exception of the Cyclone, in which case you should just back off as far as you can when he glows red. Note that it is absolutely possible to just run away from most of his attacks as well instead of rolling. I find this especially useful for the Cyclone. If you want to get even more ballsy to increase your damage output, especially if you have taunt to make him face you, then I highly recommend Human Fortress and Armor Form, as both will increase your damage reduction noticeably. And you can't get flung back every time he inhales in your general direction. Speed Form is also a good choice as well for putting plenty of space between you and the Berserker in as little time as humanly possible. Combine this with Omnia Vanitas and you can literally dance circles around him. Shield Matrix is also a viable defensive skill. Note that it has a longer cooldown time. I also tend to have a lot more trouble with this because the animation I can never time properly, and I just get slapped the moment that I let go of the button, so if you're somewhat practiced with it, then this is absolutely useful because it regains HP as well when you hold it in. I can also see various agility-based maneuverability skills like Sliding Shot working out well for him also. I don't particularly use them, but it's always nice to have an oh shit button just as a failsafe for human error. Okay, now that we've talked about defense, let's talk about the polar opposite, offense. The Angry Berserker doesn't take much to put a dent into. He's not particularly heavily armored, he's a big-ass target to shoot, and again, he's the first boss in the game, so they couldn't possibly make him too tough, right? So first off, his weak spot is exactly where you think, his head, as I'm sure anybody will notice really early on, because the aimbot you have in this game actually tends to give you a lot of free hits on his face with almost no effort. This is a thing that about almost any one of these enemy types have, too. Not just this one particular boss, so remember that for later on down the line. Also note that you want to aim a little bit lower on his face. It's like the very point of his nose for the most part, if you want more accuracy. The hitbox seems a little janky sometimes. The first time around, I remember just dumping tons of rounds into this guy without even aiming for the face, and he went down fairly quick. So the extra damage is always a plus. If you have the aggro, it's incredibly easy to dump a bunch of rounds at him using the bullet circle just to reach your top DPS score. Just be mindful not to get too trigger happy and dodge out of the way occasionally. This enemy isn't particularly hard to inflict status ailments on either, so fire, poison, and every form of paralysis works really well. I have no footage of paralysis, but I know for a fact that level 3 shots in expert mode can make this fight very advantageous for you if you have some intelligence spec'd into your builds. Finally, explosives. Do piss poor damage, to be honest. I'm not very impressed with the numbers considering that my Dovery pistol on my sniper can do upwards of almost 3k on a critical headshot and shoots way faster. So in retrospect, there's almost no point in using a rocket launcher here, to be honest with you. Okay, now we're going to move on to classes, strategies, and the feasibility of all the different classes that I have, and things that I can foresee for your possible builds later on. It may be very different for you depending on what's comfortable. This is just what I did with experimentation. And obviously I can't test every skill on every enemy in the game, that's just asinine. So for those of you who are unaware from the changing outfits, weapons, and skills during this recording session that I used as the foreground video, I ran into this fight with multiple different setups, 5 to be exact. More info on these will be available in another video if you want to see exactly how I set them up. And there are many viable ways to turn this enemy into your bitch, so let's discuss them. First up is my dexterity-based class, which has a lot of agility and vitality in it as well. Dexterity and agility can take you a long way because it affects speed and weak spot damage tremendously. Your dex build can be wildly different from mine, so I'll only touch on general skills that they affect, as dex gives you access to a lot of damage-dealing oriented skills like Blazing Shot and Graviton Shot. With a little strength and intelligence, you can apply a fuck-ass ton of damage over time to this enemy at all times. If nothing else, 19 agility will net you an Omnia Vanitas, and that can make you keep your distance much easier. All in all, it was pretty easy to take this enemy down with my dex build. Note that I am going to be probably at least 50 levels higher than you would be in this in expert mode to be able to do the things that I'm doing, and that does make a significant difference. I'm not going to pretend like my level doesn't make a major difference on how easily I'm taking this enemy out. But just be noted that my agility and my speed kept me away from this guy constantly. And I didn't even have to keep my finger on my Omnia Vanitas skill. So that's always something to keep note of right there. Next up is my tanking class that primarily has strength and intelligence with a bit of dexterity to be able to use my rocket launcher skills. It's designed to be up in the enemy's face so that whenever that they scream, I can scream back and remind them of their place in this world, under my boot. Primarily the skills from this customization weren't very useful for damage, but Graviton Shot 2 or 3 can easily hold the boss still and keep damage on him, allowing you to also unload with something full automatic right into his noggin. Vitality is important for a number of reasons, but it also nets you a defense buff. Human Fortress as well is very good for resisting knockback, and taunts that allow you to make him face you, allowing for even easier face shots. So in conclusion, tanking him is incredibly fun and incredibly effective because he continually faces you and allows you to easily deposit all of your rounds directly into his face until he falls the fuck over, which is very effective. Just make sure that you're the one in control and not the boss. It's very easy for him to flip that on its head suddenly when you're not paying attention. So either make sure that you have like a ton of defense to be able to just face tank the guy, or that you just know what you're doing in front of him. Either way, it'll work just fine. And now we have my sniper build, which was easily the fastest clear of all of my fucking runs at 1 minute and 11 seconds. Now this information has a few concerning factors in that only 2 runs I actually cared about the clearing time on them and getting through them as fast as possible, which was my sniper and my sword setup, hence why they're the only 2 who have clear times under 2 minutes. As my tank, I stalled even so I could showcase the moveset. Also take note that my sniper is the only class sporting a tier 8 weapon that is a sniper rifle with the highest single shot damage in the game of all of the sniper rifles, I'm pretty sure, unless there's something in the DLC, and mods to increase critical and weak shot damage. So ultimately the results are showing from that gear, and that makes a significant impact. Moving on to the actual skills of the sniper rifle, explosive shot is weak because explosion damage. But snipers are capable of putting weak spots as a lock-on for all of your other party members. This would be useful if it weren't for the fact that you basically get this by default with the aim bot, so long as you have the aim assist on, so unfortunately it's not very useful. One strategy that does work exceedingly well with both pump shotguns and bolt-action sniper rifles is that you can strafe around walls in the corners of the room between recharge times like such. It's a useful strategy because you can keep circling around the pillar and essentially stay out of harm's way fairly easily, provided that he does not enrage. I recommend you to turn off the auto-aim when you do any kind of wall strafing like this, as it takes time for the bullet circle to actually take effect. Whereas if you just turn it off completely, your only limitation is yourself, not the system. All in all though, it is easily the fastest character that I had cleared anything with tons of damage, mostly because of the way that the weapons are set up though. It just has a ton of weak spot damage on them. So it just melted this boss in no time whatsoever. Okay, so we've gone over DD, we've gone over tank, but what if you want to be a healer or a support class? Now this is one that I've only just recently built to take full advantage of playing the safest, while also being able to fully utilize the very limited NPC commands. This is a fairly useful and easy strategy that requires intelligence and some vitality for added survivability. You are your team's healer. Just set them on attack my target and let them take care of everything, while you just take occasional pot shots, and that's about it. It's really easy. Your viability only increases when you add in skills like Electrodynamic Stunner to render the boss vulnerable. It's a useful thing to add as well if you're, especially in extreme mode, is Armor Break and Power Break Shot, both if possible. Combining Power Break Shots with Armor Stance and Armor Break Shot with Power Stance will make any boss that much easier to deal with. Try saying that 10 times fast. And finally we have Sword Viability. Typically, I only sword against 2 enemy types, Humanoid and certain mechs later on in the game, because it actually does good damage against mech armor if you can't land a weak spot hit. The sword is really designed for PvP if you ask me, seeing how mobile the skills make you and the fact that you can deflect fucking bullets. I'm more of a fan of guns than swords on top of it, so I never considered using it for a big bad. And man, did I make a mistake on that. I can't tell you how many sword skills you'll have access to the first time around, or even if swords are available, but I can definitely tell you that with Power Stance, Melee Booster 2, my Speed, Power, and Human Fortress buffs, I was able to fucking shred this guy. You are very vulnerable while using a sword because you're very close to his attacks, so Shield Matrix might be very useful. If not, then be prepared to take a lot of hits on the nose and deal with them accordingly. What makes the sword so goddamn good against this enemy is that every tick of your animations when you attack makes an enemy stutter, which locks them into place. If they're locked onto another ally, this allows you to unleash absolute fucking hell on the mob if you aren't their primary focus. This stutter is especially noticeable with Horizontal Square or the ultimate attack. So, all in all, really, it's just you beat the absolute fucking snot out of this guy when he can really not do much about it because he's just being locked in place. Stunlock is a really major thing. It was back when I played Vindictus, and it is no different here. It is just as overpowered as any other kind of fucking MMO out there with a live combat system. Do not take it for granted. Alright, and on that note, that's everything I needed to go over here, folks. I hope that if he was giving you shit that you beat his ass after seeing this, and if not, and you beat his ass, then good for you regardless. And if he's still giving you trouble, then, like I said, watch his movements, roll out of the way, make sure you have a competent healer in your group, or 2. Just a healing bullet or 2 should be plenty if you're setting up your own Arvises to be that healer. And then make sure that you tell them to focus on healing when HP bars get a little bit lower. Sometimes you have to specifically tell them to heal, which is kinda gay. If you have issues with his attacks, get a basic defensive skill like Omnia Vanitas or Shield Matrix, and finally, level up a bit if he's still steamrolling you. There are plenty of ways to increase your character's strength to overall dominate this enemy. I'll see you guys in the next boss guide. Take it easy. See you then.